All right, so last class we left off here with our ball bounce, and we had just ghosted this to start kind of previewing, one, the arcs of the ball, but also just kind of getting an idea of how we could build in this anticipation. So we needed the ball to kind of match the direction of the arc here to, again, anticipate the ins and outs of our arcs. So we got all that built in. The last thing we're going to do is just clean up the overall arcs here. So if we scrub through this and just kind of look at the frames before and after every contact. Now, you may not have this issue with yours, so if you don't see this, you don't necessarily have to do this step. But when I'm looking at mine, if you actually look at those frames before and after each contact, so basically these stretching poses here, there's a huge gap between that stretch and then the contact in the next frame. And we really don't want that amount of gap. We're going to see an awkward sort of pause or jump in the movement of this ball when we play through it. So we do want to come in here and start correcting this stuff by hand. So I'm essentially going to go between each or before and after each contact, and I'm going to come in here and grab this ball in translation, and we're going to fix this by moving it down and possibly over if we need to. So what I'll do here is over here in the outliner, I'm going to hold shift and click on the plus symbol here on my group or my rig here, just so I can see everything. I'm going to select the translation, so we're going to come back here and adjust the translation for this. And again, we're going to come right before that contact, so on this instance it's going to be frame 9. And let's go ahead and let's just manually push this down and maybe slightly over. So again, this should be almost touching the ghosted image of our contact or our squash. And then once I get that into place there, I'm going to select the translate X and Y over here in the channel box, and then let's right click and hit key selected. Now, if your ghosted image doesn't update, if you actually scrub through this, it should update the animation, and then it'll update the ghosted images. So we're going to go through this and just fix the rest of these. Now, again, if you don't have this issue where there's not or where there's a gap there, you may not necessarily have to do this step. But if there's quite a bit of difference here in those positions, we do need to fix that. So I'm going to go to the next pose right after this contact, and let's grab this ball now and just push it down. And then I'm going to key select the X and the Y here. And then let's scrub through this and just keep doing this as we go. So let's go to the next contact. So there, it looks like there is a bit of space there happening. So let's grab that and push it down and maybe slightly over. And then we'll key select X and Y. And then let's go to frame 23. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll push it down and maybe slightly over. Key select. And let's see, so the next frame here is frame 31. We'll push it down slightly over, and then key select that. And that looks like frame 33 is our next frame or our next pose here. We'll key select that. And then the last one I'm going to do, so I'm not going to do all of these, but I think 37 really needs it. But I think after this, the bounces get so short that it's almost, we're really not going to notice it. So, all right. So I think that's a lot better. Now we do have some oddities happening here that we're going to have to fix in the graph editor. So if we were to actually trace this arc that's happening here, we can actually see it kind of, it goes down, it starts the arc nicely, and then it kind of wavers, or it kind of pushes in here to the left a little bit, and then the arc kind of goes backwards and then goes into the contact. So this is something we're going to have to fix in the graph editor. This is most likely happening because our handles for our curves are overshooting one another, and it's creating this weird kind of S shape. Or I guess a backwards S shape in this case. So let's select the translation node here, and then let's open up our graph editor. So again, make sure you're under, actually we'll just go to Windows, Animation Editors, and open up the graph editor. And in here, I'm going to clean up one curve at a time, so I'm not going to do the X and the Y at the same time. Let's just grab Translate Y, and then let's frame it up by hitting this button up here. And then let's actually take a look at the graph or the curve here, and let's see if we have any kind of weird irregularities. And really, we want to smooth this curve out. We don't want any sort of S-shapes or any kind of weird dips and things like that. So if I come in here at the very beginning and really look at this, you can start to see that weird kind of shape here, where it's almost making like an S shape. Now the reason why this is happening, if I grab this first handle down here, this handle is way overextended. It's actually coming way beyond the next keyframe, and that's why we're getting this kind of weird shape. So let's grab the handle here, and let's actually push it in like so, and you can see it starts to smooth that curve out a lot more nicely. And we can maybe grab this handle and push it in a little bit. And so at this point, we're just really looking at these handles and seeing if we can smooth them out a little bit. It might be happening a little bit here. So let's grab this handle here. Oof. I'm actually going to grab all of these. I'm going to right click and break their tangents. And then I'm going to deselect everything, click on this handle or this key, and then pull its handle down here a little bit. Let's grab this one down here at the end and maybe lessen the exaggeration on that. We still want that slow in happening there, but I'm just trying to clean that arc up a little bit. I think that'll be good. We're just looking for a nice, smooth kind of curve. We really don't want stuff like this, you know, where these handles are overextending our next keys. So I think that's good for the translate X. Let's hop into translate Y now. Again, let's frame this up by hitting the button up here to frame all. And now this one, we have a huge problem. That's all of these keys here before and after all the contacts. So again, this curve dictates the up and down of your ball. And when we have these little dips here, these kind of weird curves here, it's going to cause a weird pop in your ball. So we're going to have to fix this by hand. I'm going to grab all these keys here at the bottom, and I want to make sure that the handles are broken. So let's right click and hit break tangents. And now let's zoom in, and I'm going to grab this key here. So this is a contact for the ball, and I'm going to grab this handle here and then push it in like so. And we're just getting rid of that weird overextended arc or curve there. And so that's a lot better. Let's go to the next one and do the same thing. So I'm going to grab the contact key. Oh, I don't know why it does this. I think if you double click, maybe. Sometimes if you click, it'll select all your keys instead of just the one you want. So be careful about that. So there, it did it again. Let's push that down. Let's come down here and we'll fix this one. So it looks like most of these, the problem is really just coming from the contacts. And if we just grab these handles after we break them, and we could come in and fix those to smooth them out. Now this one isn't really an issue with a contact, but I think that handle's too far up. And that should be good. So let's minimize that for now and hit play. So you can already see it kind of fix that arc. We no longer get that exaggerated sort of backwards S shape that we were getting from before. And I think that's a lot better. So let's go ahead and stop that. Now, at this point, we're pretty much done with the ghosting. So we got our arcs looking nice and clean. We got our stretches in there. We built in the anticipation for the ins and outs of our arcs. And so at this point, I think we can unghost this. So I'm just going to grab the ball geometry, and then I'm going to make sure I'm underneath the animation submenu. And let's go to visualize and unghost all. And it should turn that ghost right off for us. All right, so at this point, we're almost done. We just need to add the roll. We need our ball to start rolling forward. So that's going to come out of the rotate group node here. And what we want to do is we want to start on frame 1. And let's see where the rotation's coming from. So I'm not really sure. Let's take a look here. So it looks like it's going to be the z-axis. So this is what's going to make our ball look like it's going forward here in rotation. So we want it to start at 0 on frame 1. So let's make sure we're on frame 1. And then over here in the rotate Z of our rotate group node, I'm going to right click and key select that value of 0. Now our ball is going to roll through this entire animation. So we want it to roll through till I think frame 80, because that's when our roll stops. And we actually need it to roll backwards in order for this to look like it's rolling forwards. We're going to rotate it backwards so it looks like it's going forward. So we need to take our rotate Z, and we're going to put a negative value in here on frame 80. Now this is another one of those instances where we don't really know what the correct value is until we test it out. So this is kind of a trial and error thing. I'm just going to put in a value, and we're going to see what it looks like, and then we'll adjust it accordingly from there. Now I know it's going to be relatively high, so I'm going to do something like negative 1500, and then I'm going to right click and key select that value of negative 1500 on rotate Z on frame 80. And in order to see this now, I need some sort of point of reference or a texture on the ball. So we already applied this on the last class. So if I hit 6, I should be able to see that shader on my ball. And let's zoom out here. I'm going to turn off the grid now, just so it's not visually distracting. And let's go back here and hit play. The amount of rotation is actually not bad. I think that's pretty close. What we want to avoid is over-rotating it or not rotating it enough. So if we have too much rotation, what will happen is your ball won't be moving very far, but it's going to keep spinning like crazy. And it's going to look like it's kind of spinning in place. So that's not what we want. If you don't have enough rotation, the ball is going to keep moving, but then it's going to move forward, but it's not going to really rotate. So it's going to look like it's just skeeting across or sliding across the ground plane, which we really don't want. So I'll show you how to fix this. So I had a pretty good guess there, I guess. I got a little lucky when I guessed 1500. So we can still clean this up a little bit. So we are going to have to use the graph editor. So with our ball, we do want to build in a couple things there. We want a linear sort of curve to begin with, so we get a lot of spin initially, and then the ball will eventually lose momentum and slow down at the end. So we're going to need to slow out there at the end, or a slow in rather. So let me stop this, and let's grab our ball's rotation group node. Let's open up the graph editor and take a look at that rotation here in the graph editor. So again, this already has built-in slow in, slow out on both ends, and we really need this to be more linear at the beginning to eliminate that. So we want it to be pretty fast. We don't want it to hold the rotation there. So let's grab the handle here and actually push it down to lessen the exaggeration. Now I might not make it completely linear. I'm going to leave just a little bit in there, and that should be good. Now here at the end, I do want that to hold a little bit so we get that slow in happening. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to break that handle. We might exaggerate this a little bit, so I'm going to grab this and pull it to the left a little bit, and that should be good there. And let's minimize this and just see how that affects our performance here, our animation. And I think that's working a lot better. Now, just to show you what happens if you don't get lucky on your first guess on terms of, how much should I rotate this ball, you can fix this in the graph editor. So if I grab the rotation there and grab this last keyframe. So again, remember these values going up and down vertically here on the side. So it starts here at 0 and it goes down negatively, or it goes positively if you go up. These are Maya units. So this is what's dictating how far this ball is rotating in Z, or how many units it's rotating in Z. So if I were to take this key here at the end and push it down further, that means it's going to rotate negatively more. So, if I take this down to negative 2000, it's going to rotate backwards a lot more times or more frequently. So let's take a look and see what that looks like at negative 2000 rotations. Let's actually go extreme just so you can see what it looks like. You can also update this here. So let's key in. Actually, let's just do it in the graph editor. It looks like I accidentally put it on frame 81 too. Let's grab that and put that back over. And then I'm going to come in here and key in negative 4000. And you can see it shoots that key way down there. And now let's see what this looks like. So this should be totally wrong. Yeah. So this is too much rotation, and the ball's only moving forward very slowly for a little bit of time, but this thing just keeps going in terms of spinning. So that's obviously too much rotation. Now, not enough rotation is going to look something like this. Let's take this. So I'm going to select this last key here, and I'm going to come up into the stats editor here, and let's key in 100. So that's going to, no, let's do negative 100. No, let's do negative 500. There we go. And let's see what that looks like. It's going to look awful. I can tell you that. So I guess this just kind of changes sort of the interpretation of this animation, or the performance we're getting out of it. So this is almost like the ground is made out of ice, and this thing is just sliding across the ground. So again, we want to find sort of the happy balance between the two. And so that's just going to be a matter of increasing or decreasing the amount of rotation you're getting in Z until we have something that looks like it matches the type of performance we're going for. So I'm going to stop that. Let's grab our rotation here, and let's hop back into the graph editor. And like I said, I feel like a negative 1500 was pretty good. So I'm going to grab that last key there, and then up here in the stat editor, I'm going to key in negative 1500, hit enter, and let's reframe that, and that should be pretty good. I could probably get away with adding a little bit more rotation, but I think we'll leave it there. Now, the last thing we want to do, so we've got our spin built in now. The last thing I want to do is I want to build in some type of settle in. So we have all this kind of forward momentum where our ball just keeps going forward and forward, and then it kind of slows down and loses that speed. But we don't have any sort of settle in where the ball kind of rests back into place. So this is something that we're going to want to add. And really, this is something we want to be very subtle. So we're going to do this both in rotation and translation. So we need to move backwards in translation. We need to roll back in rotation. So I'm going to grab the translation group node. I'm going to hit W to bring up my tool here. And so this ball stops at frame 80. And because we want this to be fairly subtle, I don't want to go forward too many frames. So I'm going to maybe make this a 3-frame adjustment here. So I'm going to go to frame 83. And let's come in here and grab the Translate X and just push it back ever so slightly. And then let's come up here into the channel box, right click on Translate X and hit Key Selected. The next thing I want to do is I do want to rotate it backwards. So I'm going to grab the Rotation group node. And let's bring up that rotation tool here. And then on frame 83, let's grab this Rotation Z here and just rotate it back a little bit. And let's come up here under the Rotation attribute and hit Key Selected. Now, usually this is very jarring at first, so let's go ahead and hit play. Yeah, so not subtle enough. Now, part of this is because we haven't cleaned this up. A lot of the times when we start adding keys like this, again, we get those handles that overshoot one another, and we need to go in and smooth the curve out. But also, there's not enough subtlety in terms of the increment of movement. So we could maybe get in the graph editor and start adjusting the height of our keys in the graph editor so we can either increase or decrease the amount of movement in Maya units. So let's go in and fix that. So I'm going to stop this. Let's hop into the graph editor and let's start with the translation first. So I'm going to grab that translation node and we moved it back in X. So I'm going to grab that X attribute here on the left column and let's hop here at the end and take a look. So yeah, I can already see that weird kind of S shape happening there, and that's probably happening because the second to last keyframe is overshooting it, and it is. Now, if you don't have your broken tangents here, just make sure you grab both of these keys, right click and hit break tangents, and then I'm going to come in here and grab that second to last key. Let's grab its handle that's way overshot here. Oh, be careful. So again, it selected all those, and when you edit one, it edits all the others. So I'm going to deselect those and make sure I grab just that one. And then let's bring this in here, like so. And so we're just looking for a nice, smooth arc. Now, this still has kind of a dip to it, and I want it to be a nice flowing upwards arc. So I need to grab this last key and pull its handle up. That way we get that nice flowing arc instead of something that kind of dips down like this. Now, this actually might not be enough translation, so I'm going to push this down just a little bit. And when I push this down, that's actually going to push it backwards more. So we'll leave that there. Let's hop into the rotation now. And we rotated it backwards in Z. So let's come in here. So we have that same problem where we get that weird kind of curve. Let's grab that key down here, right click, and again break the tangents. And let's grab that handle and push it in because it's way overextended. And then again we get that kind of S shape going on still. So let's grab this last key down here and let's push its handle down again so we get that nice flowing arc. And then I can tell you that just by looking at this, that's too much rotation. So let's push that down and maybe push that handle back up just to smooth that curve out a little better. And so at this point, it's going to be a back and forth process. We're going to change that a little bit just by slightly reducing the amount of movement in both rotation and translation until we get a nice subtle settle back into position. So let's deselect that and hit play. It might be too much rotation still. So let's grab our rotate, hop back into the graph editor, and let's grab this last key here and push it down just a hair. And then we might still have too much translation, but we'll see. Yeah, I'm going to take it down just a bit. Just going to take the rotate. I'm just going to add just a little bit more by pushing that up. Oh, not all of them, just that one. Just a little hair. And then let's grab our translate and let's grab our X. Let's come down here. And so that is too much. I'm going to pull it up just a hair. Minimize this, and then let's hit play. And I think that's better. So we could keep trying to finesse this by again going back and forth between the two. And I think that's going to do it. So it's just a subtle little touch where our ball would just kind of settle back into place. It wouldn't go completely forward and then stop abruptly. So let's stop this. And so we're going to look at how we're going to save this out for turning this in on Monday. Now, again, I need two things. I need your final Maya scene file. I don't need the project folder, just the scene file. And then the play blast that we're getting ready to set up. Now, we want to think about the sort of the staging process of your scene here. So when we're baking out the final play blast here. Now, you want to take this from an interesting angle. So if we do it from the side here, we're going to see the arcs here, but we're not going to, it's not a very dynamic angle here. We're not seeing, it's maybe not the best angle to view this from. So we're going to change the camera angle. Another camera angle that isn't very good is one that's coming maybe from the top like so, because we don't see a break between the ball itself and the ground plane or the horizon line. And this is not really, again, demonstrating all the hard work we put into this ball. We don't really see all of the bounce, the stretch, and all that. We don't see the arcs at all in this. So again, this would be a terrible camera angle. We want to see as much of this as we possibly can. So I think a 3/4 angle view is really good. Now a really low one, again, may not be the best. So we want to maybe have our camera tilted, coming a little up a little higher, tilted down at our scene. And then we don't want our camera to be super far away. So this is maybe a little bit too far. So we really want to frame this up so we're utilizing or maximizing our screen real estate. So I'm going to zoom in as much as I can here from about a 3/4 angle view. And let's scrub through this and see where our ball ends. So it comes right off of the frame. So I might zoom out just a little bit here and push my camera over. And I think that'll be good. So I'm really using as much of my screen as possible, and I'm getting all the performance here. There's a clear distinction between the ball and the ground plane, so when it gets into its arcs, all of its arcs are clearly above the horizon. So I think that'll emphasize the arcs and the motion that we're seeing throughout. Another thing you want to do, so I've already turned mine off, but just make sure you turn off that grid so it's not visually distracting and in the way. And then we're ready to play blast this. So I'm going to right click the timeline down here below. Let's go to Play Blast and click on the options box and then just double check these settings. So for format, we want to make sure we have QT for QuickTime. Encoding is set to H.264. Quality, leave it at 70, that's fine. Your scale, we do want that to be a value of 1. Frame padding, we'll leave at default, which is 4. And then you want to make sure you have Save to File selected. And then down here below, we can select the movie file, and we're actually going to hit Browse. And I'm just going to temporarily save this to the desktop. Now, with this, since you're going to turn this in, this actual Play Blast, make sure you name it with your naming convention. So we want to title this last name underscore first name underscore ball bounce. And so we'll just name it as such and hit save. And then we'll hit Play Blast. Now, I already saved this in the previous class, so I just hit OK to overwrite the old file. And that's it. So we'll go ahead and close this. We'll save our scene file here. So I'm going to hit Control S just to save over my scene file. And then it looks like we're done in Maya. So what you'll want to do is, again, turn in this ball bounce video file. And then in your project folder, go ahead and pull out, where are you? Am I blind? Fruitbowl. Maybe it's in here. Oh, here it is. We'll hop into our scenes file, and then again, I would turn in my final ball bounce scene file. So that's what I need for Monday. I'm going to stop here.